Hello everyone, it's Bonita from Pennies to Dollars. And many of you know that I was raised on a farm by Depression era parents, and I still live about 1,000 feet from where I grew up. I live in a house that was built in 1907. I have one heater in the living room. I live very similar to the way I was raised, but of course I have more added modern amenities than I grew up with. But I thought it would be interesting today as we talk about trying to save money and how hard it is to save money, if I maybe talked about some of the things that happened when I grew up, and we can see how much things have changed over the years. And this is why things are so expensive, is because we have really evolved into the way that we spend money, the way that we save money, and the way that we even use the things that we have. When I grew up, we shared bath water. And maybe some of you remember this. And I was lucky. I got to be the first one in the bathwater because I was the youngest. Then there was my mom. Then there was my dad. And we all shared bathwater. And I think it's because they grew up in a time where they didn't have indoor plumbing and it had to be heated and it had to be hauled in. So they were all about conserving, saving, and using as little resources as possible. And so we also would not wash our hair when we bathed because it was cold. The bathroom wasn't heated, our bedrooms were not heated, and you got in, you hurried, you got out, and you did not want your hair washed before you went to bed because it would just literally freeze. It would not ever dry overnight. And so we washed our hair one time a week, as females did, on Saturday morning, and then mom would put it in curlers, which I hated because there was the pulling and the tugging, and I'd sit there, it seemed like for 2 or 3 hours for her to put my hair up, and it all had to just be perfect. And that was the only day that my hair was washed the entire week, her too. And she colored her own hair from the time I can remember on. She colored her own hair. She always cut her own hair. We never went to the beauty parlor for anything. She cut my dad's hair, my brother's hair. It was always all done at home. And I see a lot of this being moved back into the way we are doing things today. I see a lot of people cutting their own hair, coloring their own hair. I see them talking about washing their hair less during the week to save shampoo. I see a lot of the things moving back into that way. But I thought it would be interesting for me to tell you about some of the things that we also ate growing up. I grew up eating turnips that would grow wild. We sliced them and ate them with salt like you would a radish. I also grew up eating lettuce that we would eat with salt. We didn't have any salad dressings in the house. We didn't make salads. We grew our own carrots. We would peel off the outside, wash them, and eat them plain. I thought that's the way you ate carrots, was just to peel them, wash them, and eat them out of the garden. And so we didn't even have carrots in our salad. It was just lettuce with salt. And it's really pretty good if you haven't tried that. We would slice up bananas and put them in milk and sprinkle sugar. That would be a dessert sometimes. And we also would have cooked frosting on the stove, and mom would put it between saltine crackers, and we would have that as a dessert at times. And that is still really, really yummy. I have fed that to my kids, and that salt and sweet taste together is just fantastic. We also would have cooked pudding on the stove, and mom would add mini marshmallows and let them melt into the pudding. And we would have little normal half-cup servings in dishes. She would take the box of pudding and she would divide it up, and it'd make about 4 servings, and that's what we all got. There was no big containers of pudding or big desserts. They were all portion sized and they were all regulated. We also would have oven toast where she would butter both sides, cook it in the oven, and it would be crunchy on the outside and chewy on the inside. And sometimes we would have that with breakfast, and sometimes we would have that with meals depending on what we had that evening. We had a lot of the same rotating recipes and a lot of the same frugal recipes. A lot of them I didn't like. I grew up kind of off grid. Sometimes we would get squirrel and pheasant and rabbit, and I didn't like any of that stuff. And we would butcher our own cattle and things. And so I knew from a young age where meat came from, and I didn't want any part of that because I had seen the process of it, and it really bothered me. And so over the years, I still kind of have a problem with that because of where I came from and what I saw growing up. We didn't have any heat in our bedrooms, and Mom would pile so many blankets on me I couldn't even roll over at times. We would have an electric blanket when it got really cold, and it would be so cold in my room that I literally could see my breath. We never had anything in our house like potato chips. We never had any cream of mushroom soup, cream of chicken soup. None of those things were around to cook with. And so it was a very different environment. We didn't have a lot of different kitchen gadgets. My dad always made instant tea, instant coffee. We had an electric skillet. We had a stove and an oven, and Mom had a pressure cooker. And that was pretty much it. We didn't even get a microwave until I was in junior high. And so everything was made from scratch. We even went to the neighbors to take big glass gallon jugs or jars and fill them up with milk. And we filled them up straight from the dairy tank with the spout on it, and it had a self-pay box where you paid, like, I don't know if it was $1 a gallon or 75 cents a gallon, but you paid on the honor system, and we would go and get our milk and we would bring it home. So as you can see, it was a very different environment than the way things are done today. And that's what I grew up with. So some of these things that you hear from me, I have tweaked along the way, or I have upgraded along the way, but those are the things that are embedded in the back of my mind when I'm talking to you. So I hope that you find this interesting, because I think I'm one of the younger generations who still have memories like this. I had older parents, I was the youngest child, and so I have a lot of these memories that a lot of people my age didn't grow up around. My husband always says, "You grew up so much different than I did." And we're exactly the same age. So this is where I'm coming from, so I'm hoping that you're enjoying this video. We had a set of menus that we followed, and we rotated around. We had a lot of the same things every single week, didn't think anything about it. That's just the way that we cooked. We did have sauerkraut and hot dogs, which I was not a fan of. And we had beans on bread. We didn't have cornbread, we had beans on bread, and I still enjoy eating it that way. And when we did have cornbread, we ate it with butter and syrup, and that would be an entire meal. And I think a lot of that comes from my dad grew up eating cornmeal mush, which was a cornmeal product that you made, sliced, and fried, and then ate butter and syrup on top, and that was one of his favorites. He also would come home at lunch and just eat a fried egg sandwich, which you can't get much more frugal than that. And we had the choice of like hot cereal for breakfast, which was frugal, pancakes, or we would have bacon, toast, and gravy. I didn't even know that there were biscuits. We didn't have biscuits. We had bacon, toast, and gravy. Our gravy went on our toast. Our toast did not get soggy like it does on biscuits, and we would sprinkle the bacon on top and eat it like that. And that was a very normal thing that we had most days of the week growing up. And we grew up with things like soup potatoes, not potato soup, but soup potatoes. It was potatoes that you cooked on the stove, and you added onion and just covered them with milk and added salt and boiled them until they were warm, and then you ate them in a bowl. So they weren't thick and creamy like potato soup, but we all loved them. They had a real yummy onion flavor, and that's something that we had very, very often. Sometimes we would have them on the side and scoop them out and let the milk drain into the pan and not use that, and then smash them and add butter on them and eat them like a baked potato with that onion flavor. So those were some of the things that we grew up eating. Cereal was only on Saturday mornings, and we only had like shredded Big Biscuit, shredded wheat, and we only had like Cheerios and Post Toasties. If you remember, they were the old type of cornflake. And so those were pretty much our choices. We didn't have sweetened cereal. We ate them with milk and sugar, and we read the cereal boxes word for word. That was so exciting to get to read the cereal boxes on Saturday morning. We didn't sit in front of the television to eat. It wasn't allowed. It wasn't even something that we ever asked to do, because we just knew that you ate at the table and that's what you did. And so Saturdays were very exciting because we got to have cereal with milk. Another one of my Frugal favorites was we would have rice with milk and cinnamon and sugar. And if we had enough left, we could heat that up and have it for breakfast, which was always an exciting treat. And I always liked lots of cinnamon in mine, but that was always one of my favorites. And I still like that to this day. Mom cooked everything she could with dried milk. That was a staple, probably because we had to go to the farm to buy fresh, but dried milk was kept at all times, and we used it in almost every single dish that we cooked that called for milk. Our milk that we got from the farm was only used for drinking. And then we also had mackerel patties, which a lot of people I know have not heard of this, but it comes in a can like salmon. You wash off the gray slime of the fish and you take the bones out, which you don't have to take the bones out, but we always did. And you would mix it with like egg and crackers and mix it into kind of a little meatloaf type of thing, and then fry it on patties. And it was a very, very frugal meal, because even still the mackerel cans only cost probably $1 now. And of course we had beans a lot of times, and the beans weren't served with ham. They were just beans in a bowl. So I hope you've enjoyed reminiscing with me over some of the things that happened to me growing up and some of the ways that we lived. And I hope to see you in a future video.